Good afternoon.
Nice to see all of you. I say that every time, and the board members are tired of hearing me say it, but it's never my favorite to not be sitting in the same room. But we do have this meeting always online, just for the sake of also being sensible about how we spend money. So it is a big occasion because we at the point where we're considering the sustainability and expert standard. Gabriella, we would have really preferred to just be in the same room with you, but welcome. Let me also start off by saying two other things. It's the new year. I want to wish you all a very, very prosperous new year with good progress and lots of success in the projects that you have on your agenda, but also in your personal lives. And it was a very tough and a busy and a hard-working year last year. Hopefully there's a little bit more of a breathing space. So best wishes to all of you, Gabriella, and your board for the year ahead. And I also want to introduce you to our new board member, because you would certainly have seen his name, but Han is also in the room with us. He's waving at you. Please wave at them, Han, that they can see you. It's his first meeting, and you will also get the opportunity to meet him in April. So Gabriella, over to you. It's good to see you, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. And first thing, happy 2025 to all of you. You're right, it's been a very challenging year behind, but we have another one ahead of us. So it's good to be ready. And all the best to all of you over the next year. And I would as well prefer to be sitting at the same room as you, but it is what it is, and it's also good that we have these facilities and this possibility of connecting this way. Linda, I think that the slides will be shown or presented, yes, or whatever. Do you want me to share them?
Ken, are you sharing them, or is Claudia? Oh, there we go. And Gabriella, yes, thank you. I would suggest, as always, let's get Gabriella to go through her slides. We will respond afterwards, and then I'll also give a chance to take questions and comments. Maybe two things. Firstly, obviously, we're very interested in finalizing sustainability and experts. I know you're going to talk a little bit about some of the other things. I can tell you, Gabriella, as always, we've done our preparation session, working through all the documents, and thank you for that you shared with us. And this time probably more so than in just a normal meeting where we don't have a certification due, we've spent quite significant time as a board to also think through all of this, apply our minds. So thank you very much for all of this. It is important for us to listen to you, see how you wrap it up, and obviously see what are those things that will flow into your future activities. So I'm going to let you talk, and we'll park when you want me to open it up for questions and comments. I'll certainly give you a summary of our comments after you've spoken. So over to you. Thanks, Gabriella.
Thank you very much once again, Linda, and thank you all for the attention. And it's always a pleasure to be here, mostly at this point in time when we are coming to this point of this project that has absorbed us so much over the last 2 years. So it's really an important moment for us, and I'm sure that for the PIOB as well. And before I go through the slides, let me just no, you can leave the slides. I don't know who's moving the slides, but it's okay, it's fine. But let's just me kick off by stating what's our as a board mindset and our approach and our considerations at this point in time and after the approval of the standard in December. And the first thing is that I want to share with the PIOB is that the board is fully confident and fully satisfied with the standard and with the quality of the standard and with the response that we believe that this standard, the IESBA, provides to the needs and to the calls that we have received since 2 years ago. The second thing is that this standard, the IESBA and the standard as a whole, is very comprehensive, and it is our conviction that it covers what it needs to cover and provides the responses that it needs to respond. Even if in some cases it was a little bit difficult to explain why we were covering something, it will become very clear that if we were to leave any gaps, this could be complicated, but we are satisfied that this standard is comprehensive. We are also aware, of course, as you are at the PIOB, that this is a very sophisticated and new area. We are conscious, we were always conscious and aware of the challenges in addressing this new and sophisticated area, but we were always also responsive to those challenges and to this newness and sophistication and etc. And this responsiveness was translated into a very, very active and proactive listening to our stakeholders, in a very intensive dialogue back and forth with all kinds of stakeholders over the 2 years until the very last moment of the approval of the standard by the board. And this responsiveness has also translated and materialized in something which were, on the one hand, all the adjustments that we made before the exposure draft, after the exposure draft, more recently close to the approval, to respond to specific concerns from specific stakeholders, including the PIOB. This was until the very last moment that we remained open, we remained active, proactive, and we were happy to be able to respond and to adjust as needed. And finally, our responsiveness, and I think that our maturity as a board as well, also translates in everything that we have been planning already since some time for the future of the standard. Conscious of this newness, of this sophistication, and of the integral or natural complexity of this area of sustainability, we have been planning to do to put in practice a significant package of initiatives and measures and etc. That I will have the opportunity to speak about it later, to address the concerns or to address any possible challenges that the practitioners may find in applying the standard or regulators may find in adopting and implementing the standard and enforcing it. So this is, in a nutshell, where we are as a board with respect to the IESA: confidence, aware, conscious, responsive, and ready to act and not only react to the possible difficulties that some may find in their adoption and implementation. Now, this standard, this slide that you have in front of you, I'm sure that you are familiar with it. It's my preferred slide, but I thought it was nice and good to bring it back to the PIOB at this final session, I would say, so that we can recall everything that brought us here. And what brought us here was a consideration from the start that there was a need to develop and put in place an ethics framework to support the reporting and the assurance framework for sustainability. This ethics framework is needed. This ethics framework is the third building block of a complete, integrated, comprehensive and interoperable infrastructure. And not only was it our conviction, but we received calls to develop these standards and strong support from, I would say, almost all the stakeholders, and very specific calls from very important stakeholders like the IOSCO, IFSB, IFIA, and the PIOB. And I leave it to the last. It's my last mention, not because it's the less important, but because it was a very specific approach from the PIOB, not only supporting but urging us to do it in face of the needs that the market was presenting to function well and to support stakeholders. So this is how it will look like once all the standards will be in place. And without one of these pieces, I would say that the infrastructure will not work, because this is what really ensures the existence of reliable, trustworthy sustainability information that, no matter what happens, is needed and is there. So if you can move to the next slide, please. The next slide is about these strategic and timing imperatives. Why there were and there are some imperatives related with these calls that we received from the different stakeholders that I mentioned, but also because, importantly, it's important to ensure that there may be a joint launch of IESA and ISA 5000, about which we spoke over the last months, with everything that had to do with coordination and etc. It's not that ISA 5000 and IESA are not framework neutral; they are, but they need to work because they are framework neutral. They are interoperable and they need to work together. So the need for this, the imperative, the strategic and timing imperative of having these standards finalized and delivered as soon as possible also has to do with the need to avoid this fragmentation or regulatory void and help jurisdictions to take a consistent and integrated, a rational approach to adoption and implementation of assurance and ethics standards to avoid that they have to take care of different things in different moments or make any possible decisions in between, which should not be helpful. And we also need to understand, to take into consideration that some professionals and non-professionals are already preparing to implement both standards. So it's important to meet these expectations and to meet it in a way that allow them to do the best possible in terms of adoption and consistent and coherent adoption and implementation. If you can move to the next slide, please. The next slide. In his slide, well, it's not, we are confident, and of course, we have done the best that we could and that we believe was the best that could be done by anyone, considering what we know, what we all know, and what we don't know. It's fit for purpose, it's strong. Still, the PIOB over times and recently rose some public interest issues or some public interest concerns, mainly around how implementable this standard was throughout the entity's value chain, mostly related with value chain as we understood it. The PIOB rose some concerns about clarity and the need for the standards to be absolutely understandable, to be operable, the need to simplify when possible, and some concerns that any changes might, namely some stakeholders might be requiring, might reduce the level of independence, which would not fulfill the public interest expectations. At the same time, and this is just to say, to mention the most relevant comments that we received over the last times. They were from the PIOB and from IFAC and some practitioners on some perceived complexity, which became almost a buzzword, and possible implementation challenges, mostly for small and medium practitioners. So this is like a wrap-up of the most relevant public interest focus areas that we thought we needed to address. So if you go to the next slide, please. It is our conviction, my conviction and the conviction of my board and my staff that we have responded appropriately to these topics, to these concerns that were posed. Some of them very helpful because it allowed us to understand that we could do things in a little better way, which is always good. So this is really welcome, but the place where we landed with the responses that we have developed to these concerns makes us very confident about the product, the final product. So we did significant changes, or I'm going to say changes, adjustments, with the purpose of clarifying and simplifying the framework, mostly in respect to groups and value chain provisions. The proportionality was also enhanced with this clarification and simplification mostly, and I'm not going to go through the list of simplifications and clarifications that we have made. I'm sure that the PIOB is aware, but it's important to highlight that the list is long, is significant, and is such that most of the less comfortable stakeholders before we made these adjustments were very happy with them and considered it a very significant development. So this also tells about the positive adjustments or the positive changes that we have made to the standard. And we can speak about these initiatives or this particular simplification and clarification initiatives that we took, burden reduce and etc. If you want later. But for now, I'll just leave it like this and move to the next slide, please. An important decision that the board made, and it was a decision made at the December board meeting in face of some concerns that was still remained, but also our own, or mainly our own responsiveness and awareness that this is again a complex area by nature, that this will evolve over time. This is a journey, and that there are specific areas of the standard that might need a little bit more time for the practitioners, for the industry, and etc., to be confident in their implementation and application. And I'm speaking specifically about the most sensitive part of the standard, which is value chain. I would like to recall that value chain in the whole picture is less than 10% of the standard, or close to 5%. So we should not take it as if it was the standard. Anyway, as it is an important part of it, we took a specific consideration to understand and address some concerns about how is this going to evolve, how is this going to develop, and how much time do the firms need to make their systems, adjust their systems, put in practice some policies and etc., to make sure that this is effective. So the decision was to defer the effective date of the part of the standard of the provisions on value chain for a longer period. For an additional 18 months, which means that the firms will have a period of time corresponding to 4 reporting cycles to adjust and adapt to these new provisions. We also added a lot of materials, guidance, and etc. The simplified flowcharts, which, by the way, was a very good suggestion from the PIOB that we followed up on and actually did, and was very well received by our stakeholders. And we are, of course, aiming to timely implementation together with the PIOB. Sorry, the IESBA. Let me just add the following. These IESBA responses also result from this awareness, from this humbleness, if I can say so, about what we know and what we don't know, like us all. And we understand, like everybody understands, that there is risk. The only possibility of not taking risks would have been not to do anything. And a higher risk would have been to have done just a very small thing, which should create ambiguity, complexity, different interpretations, and etc., which should be chaotic. So, having in mind this strategic option that we made to develop this standard this way, at the same level of financial audit requirements in Part 4A of the Code, of course involves risks, and we are ready to address those risks through some specific and very intentional risk management mechanisms, tools, and approaches. First, by developing guidance, which we are already doing, and we have already done with the standards, but we will keep on developing guidance, making it as simple and concrete as possible. Also, putting in place, and maybe I'd like to go to the next slide, but putting in place, can you please move to the next slide? Putting in place a monitoring platform, and thirdly, allowing all this time for reporting cycles to test the standard, to test the provisions on value chain from IESBA and the reporting standards, and to see if there is anything that ultimately, in case of a fatal flaw, would take us to reconsider these provisions, which is not very probable, but we should not put it aside. So, stepping a little bit back, where are we, and how are we facing the future, the present and the future? There is, we know, some some noise. I called it a buzzword, but anyway, I will not qualify it. There is some concerns around some perceived complexity of this standard. And without qualifying the standard, well, the first thing that I would say, and it's not the first time that I say it to the PIOB, the standard, if this perceived complexity or actual complexity, as you want to take it, is a result, is a consequence, stems from the underlying complex reality. Value chain mostly is a very complex reality with a very complex net of relationships and web of relationships and etc. So it's something that it's already there, it's already complex, and we can't avoid that complexity. It's the same complexity exactly that was inherent in group sustainability in the ETGA, the engagement team and group audits framework, and that has been transposed here with these additional provisions on value chain, which, and this is the second topic, was made necessary not because the IESBA made a decision in that respect, but because the reporting frameworks and the assurance framework impose reporting and assurance on value chain. So if we have a framework which sets up rules on value chain reporting and value chain assurance, it's absolutely inevitable that we have an ethics and independence framework to support these two frameworks. So this complexity results from this underlying reality and framework, not necessarily because the IESBA decided it. These decisions have been made by other parties other than the IESBA, and we are responding to the needs that these duties create for us. So this is my comments about the perceived complexity. It is complex because the reality is complex. It's not more complex, but most of the complexity, if I may say so, was already there with the group audits. It's the nature of the reality that makes everything very more complex. Now, some stakeholders would have preferred, and we are aware of that we would have stopped somewhere behind what we have done, like making them just making practitioners abide by the conceptual framework or something very high level or whatever. That was a possibility, but that was a possibility that we considered, and we very quickly came to the conclusion that this would foster a very ambiguous framework, very ambiguous general requirements, which should not serve the expectations of consistency in the global practice. Different interpretations, different forms of implementation, different oversight, and etc., which would again foster fragmentation and contradict the objective of consistency that was in the basis of this project. If you can move to the next slide, please, Pavel. So these responses, as I was saying, also took the board to plan, not now, but since, I'd say, 6 months ago, some kind of active monitoring and responses mechanism. We have formed, as you know, an adoption and implementation working group, which is now focused on the adoption and implementation of sustainability. We are working with other stakeholders to create partnerships, to create collaboration and coordination mechanisms, and etc., to make sure that this is not only strong but global and interoperable. But we are also considering, in response to something that the PIOB suggested time ago, and that was also suggested by some board members in our last meeting, to create a platform, let's call it like that for now, a platform, an expert working group or something similar, whatever, comprising practitioners which are already performing sustainability, who are already performing sustainability assurance engagements, to monitor the effectiveness, the operability of the application of the standards. And this is probably, together with the delay that we provided on value chain, one of the most effective ways of understanding if what we have done is fine, of helping the implementation and adoption, helping removing some perceived complexities that once put in practice may be less complex, and we had that experience before with other standards, and that may help during these 4 cycles of reporting understand if there is any fatal flaw that we maybe need to readdress. So this is fully responsive to everything, to all the concerns, together with all the other initiatives that you can see in this slide, and I'm not going to speak about one of them, any of them in detail, and I can respond to any questions afterwards. But it's really a very significant package of, or a pack of initiatives and plans to support adoption, implementation, removing questions, doubts, and etc., and ultimately make us think about what we have done. This is the best possible solution that we, and I believe anyone, could find to this situation where ethics and independence is needed at a high level. It's not something, just a tweak. It's needed at the same level as the ethics and independence requirements for financial audits, because it's the same importance and has the same impacts. And that's how we are planning to respond to this perceived complexity and to actual possible obstacles or difficulties in the implementation. If you can move to the next slide, Pavel. So I'm not going to go through each one of these slides. These slides that you may have seen aim at explaining how the IESBA responded to specific topics or public interest issues which were rose by the PIOB. And we are confident that we address them all, and that we address them in a way that that is responsive to the public interest concerns and considerations that the PIOB had in mind when raising these topics. And on our side, it was very worth having this discussion, because at the end, I'm sure that we got to a better place and to a better, highest quality and highest, more robust standard. Pavel, I think it's you who is moving this. Can you move to the two or three next slides, the one after this green slides? So this one. So that's what I was saying. I don't want to repeat much, but after all this, we have a global comprehensive adoption and implementation plan. You have here many of the initiatives and activities that we are planning and already putting in place and developing, and etc. From the more sophisticated ones with guidance, practical, technical, and etc., to the ones very simple, like short videos, fact sheets, and etc., to help the public in general understanding what we have done. And this all is been doing in coordination with IESBA. We are planning to launch a joint pack of guidance in the upcoming near future, some frequently asked questions shared by both boards and etc. So it's really a comprehensive and integrated package. And next slide, and I think it's the last one that I want to address. Yeah, this is also a familiar slide to you. I start with a familiar slide and I finish with a familiar slide. This is the journey about which we are really proud. It was a very intense period in the life of the IESBA. I think that we should be proud whatever is the future, because we decided to take this big risk of developing this standard in face of the needs of the market, in face of the needs of stakeholders, in face of the calls of the regulators, and in face of the reflection that we ourselves made with respect to the need to develop, to adjust the rich material that already exists in the Code of Ethics to make it fit for purpose for sustainability information, and help making capital allocation decisions and other kind of decisions by other stakeholders, irrespective of any kind of considerations on the purpose of this information. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be ready for, I hope, to any questions and comments that the PIOB board may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. And I think we can take the slides down. Thank you, Pavel. We have them in our pack as well. And Gabriella, we appreciate you talking to your slides. It's always, when I prepare, I always read your slides, and when you talk through it, there are lots more detail and the richness that come out. And thank you for that. As I said, we've spent some time preparing for this, and maybe just a few comments from my side, in an attempt to summarize some of the discussion that we've had, but I'll certainly also open it up to board members for their comments and their questions. And maybe just in standing back, because that's where we are now, as we think about certification, and as you wrap up on this, it certainly was, in many respects, a very constrained timeline, and as you rightfully recognize, none of your making. You had a very new topic that is, in some industries we talk about this as greenfield projects. So, the first time that you go there, and if you add to greenfields in uncharted waters, you add very strict and difficult timelines, because you've got the regulatory community, you refer to IESBA and the Financial Stability Board, but also with what's happening in Europe, also putting pressure to say, well, it would be really useful if this can be aligned and can be used when the assurance standard comes out. It does obviously result in a few things that will have to stand over, and we've seen it with the IESBA as well. And you made the point, and it is really important, that it's not of a huge amount of use if you have a sustainability assurance standard, but the ethics requirements only follow much later, because you want the first round of sustainability assurance reports to be subject to really high quality ethical requirements, and obviously independence being one of them, and also the objectivity and the quality when it comes to the preparation. So that was really, really important. And you refer to our public interest issues. We recognize that there are very many things that even in the last meeting, we could see the attempts to try and address that further, and we recognize that. The transitional provision when it comes to value chain components, some might see it as negative. We certainly see it as recognizing that this is a new area. You do need requirements. Maybe you need to give a little bit more time for especially the more complex, maybe the huge multinational preparers where assurance need to be provided, to fully understand it. So I agree with you. It is not a sign of defeat. It's a sign of humility that you don't necessarily know what you don't know, but it's important to put something out there. You gave an alternative in the form of go back to the conceptual framework and the principles if you're not ready to apply it in the 18 months, but it's also really important to have the requirements out there to test it. So we made the comment before, and we're very comfortable that you recognize the importance of monitoring, of creating this mechanism to test, to see what's happened, to find out what the difficulties are, what the potential unintended consequences are, but very importantly to also be able to respond and to react, and to, where necessary, you spoke about putting some guidance out there, which is important, but potentially also to say, well, these are maybe some of the earlier changes that we need to add to the list. We know there are some things that you said you will deal with in the next round, in the same way that the IESBA is going to do that. So this response mechanism and the monitoring mechanism, in our view, those are really important aspects for anything that is this new. So we're also looking forward, and as the PIOB, certainly going to keep our eye on maybe understanding a little bit more, but by the time we get to our next meeting, how do you do that? And very importantly, what do you see and what are you doing about it? So that's something that I suspect we're going to have lots of discussions about going forward, for those, let's call it, further refinements and further potential corrections. You don't know, but you're right, it is a complex area, and it's a complex topic, And when it's a complex topic, it becomes very complex and difficult drafting. It is important, and you might want to comment, not now, but in future, as you see what comes out of the process, just your thinking and how you can further refine if necessary and clarify and make more understandable and easy the drafting. You've done a huge amount of work, and it was something that was very important to us to absolutely align terminology between the two sets of standards. So I think it's going to be worthwhile for us to, in future, just understand, if you now sit back in analyzing all of this, what are your thinking around further clarification and potentially making drafting a little bit simpler going forward, as you probably pick up other changes that you want to bring about. I'm not going to go into the detail of our public interest issues. You've worked through them. We've recognized that you said before that you're going to think further about no-CLAR and two-way communication, and potentially what you're going to do down the value chain with no-CLAR and communication. You've done a lot about the clarity and consistency, especially in dealing with the consistent terminology, but there will probably be further refinements, we suspect. The one other really important thing is, in a way, the Part 4B, existing Part 4B of the code, and bringing in Part 5, in a way, is a pragmatic approach to deal with the requirement by regulators that this must be a profession agnostic standard. And how do you deal with non-practitioners that don't currently apply the rest of the code? And that is an important pragmatic solution, but it is pragmatic, and it's going to be interesting and important for us over time to hear about your thinking on how do you pull that a little bit closer to actually make sure that it is dealt with more fully and holistically, because it is potentially creating some practical solutions, but potentially not necessarily always solutions that are built on fundamental principles over time when it comes to, you've explained how it, for example, how it works with fees and what fees are in and what fees are seem to be assurance services and whatnot. But all of those principles around that will be important to see how it evolves in the process. So those are all the things that we are quite comfortable to tick off for where we are now, but we will keep some of them at least on our public interest issues when it comes to finalizing all of that. The one other comment that we had in our preparation, and then I'm going to open it up for comment, because I'm sure I'm going to have a couple of members that will want to clarify or say something further about some of my comments, is just the communication. And you spoke about the communication, the joint communication between yourselves and the IESB, and also the guidance that you want to issue, and guidance specifically for practitioners, but also for non-professional accountant assurance providers, because in a way they might feel that some of this terminology is fairly new to them. And you spoke about that. There's probably really also, and I'm sure you've got it in your plan and you might want to comment on it, really space for other people out there, let me call it the beneficiaries of these assurance reports, the investor community, the preparer community, to better understand, so what is this? How must they read and understand the some of the comments that they're now going to see in the assurance report about, we didn't apply this, we applied because we applied because of the transitional provision, we now just going back to the fundamental conceptual frameworks, fundamental principles. So some of those things, how do you also in all of this communication help the people that will see these reports for the first time understand independence requirements and understand the ethics behind that? So I think that's another important aspect. And probably in all of this, you will find that there's a stand back in the code more broadly when it comes to the construct of the code, if some of these things in future will be to the benefit of other assurance providers, and things like levels of assurance and all of that. So I do think there's a longer term, higher level debate that will follow. But those are some of the things that we just considered. But practically, there will definitely be a sustainability 2.1, I suspect, in the near future, with everything that it is that you see coming out of your monitoring and response. So I'm going to hand back to you, and I'm going to just give my board members a chance if they want to put up their hands for questions and comments. Thanks, Gabriella.
So, Linda, do you want me to react now, or do you want to wait for your board members?
I'm sure you've got comments, so please do, and then I'm going to
Okay.
pick up the hands. Thanks, Gabriella.
Okay. So, Linda, thank you very much. I understand that there are a number of approaches that we took with which you are in agreement, so I'm not going to touch on those. And I'm happy to know that the PIOB received well everything that we have done in terms of providing more time in terms of meeting the timeliness needed for the standard, in terms of the monitoring instrument that we are putting in place. So if the PIOB is happy, I'm not going to mention it further. On complexity and further refining the drafting in the future. So I think that your comments are very much forward-looking, and I like it because it's opening another cycle. And yes, you're right, because this is going to be a challenge for the future. And not only because we are receiving some comments about the complexity, how complex this is becoming, because we have all this community of non-professional accountants, which may progressively or gradually become captured by the code, and we need to use a language and a drafting style which is accessible to all. Also because these are signs of the times. If you look at what's happening in Europe, the main word is simplification, regulatory burden reduction, simplification. This is the word. And it, of course, meets the perspective and the mindset of the younger generation, which is not open and fine with reading complex things and a lot of things and etc. So we will need to think about to reinvent a few things to make sure that we continue being very effective, very accessible, and growingly useful. And this is the challenge that we are putting forward and in front of us, which is might other stakeholders, might other users be in the future captured by this code and make it useful for them as well. Of course, this is in our strategy and work plan, as you know. This is the plan, is to consider how we can move forward in that direction, because it is our full conviction that this code and the ethics frameworks could be very helpful to other professionals. I'm not saying that we are going to cover everything everywhere at any time, but there are some areas where it is absolutely clear that others could benefit from this approach. And just to start with tax, where it makes no sense that professional accountants are covered by a strong ethical framework, while other professionals like lawyers, consultants, etc., don't have the same level of requirements. So this is just an example. We are very conscious of that, and we have delayed slightly that project into the next year because we need to deal with a few things immediately, namely the implementation, monitoring, adoption, etc., of the sustainability standard, the firm culture and governance that is being kicked off, but also the CFO project. So we have a number of and sustainability part 2 and NOCLAR post-implementation review. And with sustainability part 2, let's call it like that, and with the NOCLAR post-implementation review, I think that I'm also responding to your comments. NOCLAR is a very, very difficult standard in terms of implementation. It faces challenges that are unique for this standard. I was not there when this was developed, but I must say that I'm very proud and very confident that this is going to be growingly important as the world moves in a certain direction. Now, the challenges are still there, and they were there and are still there, and we have committed to start as quick as possible a post-implementation review on the no-class standard, and that will be the right time also to address what we have decided in with respect to sustainability and see if there is anything more comprehensive that we must do or not with the standard. With respect to sustainability part two, let's call it like that, the PIOB had some questions. Why haven't you covered the correspondent or part 4B and all these things? Yes, it was a pragmatic and almost fatal option because we could not do everything at the same time. We could not cover the equivalent to financial audit engagements, and at the same time, the newness and the complexity that we faced in this first project recommended that we would be careful and do not go so bold and so fast with covering everything that was in front of us. So this is a stepped approach, and I think it's the right option, even if we recognize that there may be one or two things which have been left out, but that we will try to address as soon as possible with this second part of the sustainability project. And finally, with respect to the non-PAs and how are we planning to approach, as far as I understood, and communicate with this community. Frankly, Linda, well, we will need to monitor it very, very carefully, but we have not had too many problems. They have been very open, active, and accommodating the standards and preparing for their adoption and implementation in a very professional way. Of course, we will have to understand two things. First, who of them are going to be captured by part 4 or part 5? And my conviction is there won't be that many. It's going to be for the bigger ones in the jurisdictions that will allow the non-professional accountants to be active. Secondly, we will need to understand if they really understand what's in the standard and if their apparent agreement and quietness with respect to the implementation of the standard it's a real one, even or if they really understand what's there. So we have been working very closely with them. We have been developing guidance, which is also specific for them. They have like a continued support from us since the moment where we started speaking with them, and that has not finished, that continues. So it has been a very it has been a learning process, a learning curve with them, but a very rewarding one because it helps us sometimes calibrating this perceived complexity because we don't hear the same level of concern from that community. So I think I'll stop here for now. I hope to have addressed your points, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Gabriella. I'm going to go to Sandy and to Tom now because I think Sandy will probably go a little bit further into the question about investors, I'm sure. So Sandy and Tom, and then Gabriella, back to you. Thanks.
So Gabriella, you mentioned in your remarks that you were going to do sort of some FAQs, et cetera, and just in your conversation or your response to Linda's comments, you made a comment with respect to information for people who are using it as well as some for users. I guess well, I should say congratulations on all the work that you've done, right? And so I hate to ask something else or ask for something else, but I think that I'm getting a lot of questions from users and investors with respect to sustainability assurance, both the assurance standards, and I have to also remind them of the underlying ethical standards. And I think the ethical standards are particularly interesting and but challenging in the sense that there's not really much transparency for those for investors, and yet there's some very important decisions that you all have made in that regard. So my question or my request is that you guys prepare something that would be really useful for me in articulating in a very simple way the underlying features of the standard and some of the trade-offs and choices that needed to be made. So comment/question.
Thanks, Sandy. Gabriella, let me go to Tom and Mark, and then I'm going to go back to you.
Thank you, Chair. And then I'd like to also congratulate Gabriella for your enormous work you've done for the sustainability ethics court. And the one question I would like to ask, and I'm very relieved to hear that the non-PA community is open and accommodating. And then the point I would like to hear is that my question is that what's level of their understanding you evaluate out of the communication with that community? Because in your slide it says that IAF already preparing for implementation for non-PA. So could you give us a little bit more a flavor or the level of understanding on their community for this issue? Because for PAs, the issue of their complexity is has already coming out, and it's becoming one of the main topic of discussion with the PA community. But as for the communication with the non-PA community, what is the level, or is any concern or any issues you are aware of that for the implementation of this court? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Mark?
Yes, thanks. And yes, also congratulations from me for achieving this standard, in the timeline that you had, and you're to be commended as a board on that. I'd like to sort of reiterate and perhaps take a little bit further some of the points that have been made on complexity or perceived complexity, whichever way you want to put it. I mean, I think having taken the opportunity to sort of read through, for example, the independence requirements the other day, it's not an easy read. Let's be honest, and I think that possibly reflects the fact that you have been working on a very tight timetable, and you didn't have the time that you might have, sort of appreciated, to be able to sort of stand back and reflect and edit. And so what comes across in that particular section is something that's very wordy. And actually, it's only when you look at the flow charts, it's only when I looked at the flow charts that I could kind of see what it all meant and what you were getting at. And I think that experience with the flow charts and the wording, what I would encourage is that in preparing briefing materials for users of these standards, both PAs and non-PAs, I think you've got to try and distill a very long standard in order to make it accessible, particularly to the non-PAs. And I don't think you should assume any knowledge. One of the things, obviously, you've been working on this for over 2 years. You're very close to the detail, and there's a tendency, I think, to sort of produce a lot of words, and that's not really what's required for this sort of briefing exercise. It's got to be clear. You've got to explain things that, why is the part 5 and part 4B? Things which you're very familiar with, but the outside world is not. Why did you go down that route? Explain these things very clearly and concisely, and that is difficult to do. With such a long standard. I just wanted to mention the sort of practicality and timetable for the launch. So I gather that there is a a joint launch arranged for, I think it's the 27th of January. Is that correct? What format will that take, and how has that been publicised? Because it's less than 2 weeks away, and I haven't seen anything as yet on, say, LinkedIn or sort of social media. So what's the plan? What's the plan for that?
Okay, Gabriella, back to you, and thereafter we can wrap up.
Thank you so much, Linda. So with respect to Sandy's comment on investors, and if we could provide something which is a very clear, simple, readable description of the main features of the standard, sure, we will. You will see on the 27th that we are preparing some fact sheets which already try to address that request and that need. Very simple messages about what have we done, why have we done that, for whom, and what do we expect to change. The fact sheets respond to these 4 questions, and we try to put it to keep it very simple and very obvious to respond to that request, but maybe investors will need a little bit more. So as we go, we will be happy to provide what is needed, while the investors community, as we have said many times, is always a very difficult community to address. First, because they are not sometimes that active, and because it's not a consistent community. Each kind of investors have different approaches. But thank you for that proposal or that request. We will surely think about it and keep on trying to involve investors in our work, which we never stop doing, but it's actually difficult to bring them close to us. Investors always think that accounting and this kind of things is something that they should stay away, and someone should take care, because they do not want to be very much involved. So it's a very difficult dynamic that we will never stop trying to do. As you know, and we provided you with the list with the investors that we reached out to, namely with the expert standard. And it was a very significant list of investors with whom we had interactions, meetings, calls, and etc. So we are confident that at least the door is completely open, and we are completely happy, absolutely happy to respond to whatever requests coming from investors we receive, because they are probably the most relevant users of this information, even if they are not the most active in the development of the standards. Secondly, to your question, Tom, I will probably leave it for if you don't mind, to the last to respond, because I'd like to ask Ken to jump in with respect to the very concrete things that are being done now in that respect. And as I said, we are always working on that. But I can respond to you to the question, what level of understanding do they have? Of course, and Ken will tell you more and better than me, because he's the one who is keeping very close to them. But we don't have complaints. That's what the first thing that I should say. We didn't hear complaints from a non-PA saying, "Well, this is very complex, this is very complicated," and they are just taking action instead of complaining. They are working. That's my perception. The bigger ones, the ones who really want to be active in this space, they are working. They are working already for quite some time now. To be ready to implement the standards. This is the first thing. How much do they understand the standards? This is something that we will need to continue monitoring, because it may be that they don't complain that much because they haven't understood completely the deepness and the level of requirement of the standards. And we need to make sure that the objective of making these standards profession agnostic is fully accomplished. And the objective is that all the providers are subject to the same level of requirements. So we don't want non-PAs to have lower requirements, or to be allowed to implement or apply the requirements in a lighter way. It's the same framework and the same level of requirement to everybody. But then, Ken, if you allow me, Ken, I'll finalize my response to Mark, and then you can complete this one. So Mark, on complexity, and the drafting, the wordy nature of the standards, the length, some difficulty in understanding what's in there. So your challenge to us is try to make it differently in the future. I think it's our challenge, and mostly to make sure that in the materials that we are going to develop, that we try to make it simpler so that everyone can understand what's in those standards. And I couldn't agree more. But it's really challenging. First, because we have a code of ethics which is already based in some kind of concepts, words, drafting style, structure, and etc. And it's a bit dangerous to completely depart from it, because it might happen that we would have some inconsistencies along the way. But I couldn't agree more. And if this has any value, and this is what it is, our commitment, my commitment as IESBA chair, but I believe the commitment of the board, is to keep on working on that simpler, more clearer, accessible way of drafting the standards. We will see what we can do in that respect. We will surely take this very seriously, also because of the reasons that I mentioned before. This is a request that we are hearing very frequently, but also because the context and the momentum is really a momentum of a bit of simplification and a bit of clarification and etc. So the preparation of the briefing materials will have that in mind. Thank you for reinforcing that. And we will, as much as possible, try to make sure that these materials will respond to that concern, and in the future for the next projects and etc. try to put it in place and since the start, from the outset, so that we are not caught in a situation where we can't be understood. So I think it's what I wanted to say, but I'd like you to provide a more concrete response to Tom with respect to where are we in terms of implementation.
Thank you, Gabriela. And Ken, in the interest of time, I'm conscious that we are over the time for this public session. So maybe let's just do it at a high level briefly. Thank you. But yes, it is important to get the answer. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be very brief. Yes, Tom, thank you for raising your question. It is a very good question. What I can say is, from our perspective, we are very intent on working very closely with IEF in enabling the non-PA practitioners to be fully immersed in the ESA and really fully understanding the provisions in the ESA. In fact, we have a conversation, our next conversation with the leadership of IEF is Friday, to take our collaboration and partnership with them to the next level, and working on the specific steps as we work to really bring the training and education element into play with regard to that community of practitioners. But what I can say is already from the non-PA practitioner, it is going to be very significant paradigm shift for them moving to the ESA, because up until now, their standards have been focused at a very high level. They do not really have the concept of independence. Number one. Number two, their focus is on client service. It is not on the public interest. That is a critical concept that needs to be conveyed to them. And that, to give you an example, has implications for how they then embrace the rest of the standards. For example, on NOCLAR, there are no requirements to go beyond what is required under law or regulation. And that is not where the IESBA code is at the moment and where the ESA is. The ESA, in fact, does prompt the practitioner to think beyond the immediate requirements under law or regulation, and if necessary, respond in the public interest whenever they encounter no clause. So just to give you a couple of examples, but it is a very significant change in the mindset that's going to be required, and in the, as I say, in the paradigm of ethics and independence for the non-PAs.
Thank you very much for that, Ken, and thank you, Gabriella. And as we wrap up this this public session, I suspect we probably will see some of you, Gabriella, tomorrow as observers in the certification session. Also, just on and some of the board members have mentioned it, but also just from my side, this was a significant amount of work that had to be done in a short time. So well done in getting it out and getting to where it is. We are not oblivious to criticism that it's complex. It is complex. It's that, as you said, the subject matter is complex, and it does make it very hard to be clear in a new area in your drafting and specific and to the point. And there's recognition that over time this will firstly be supplemented with further guidance and fact sheets, etc., but also supplemented with the, let's call it the project 2 and things to follow. Hence the very important rapid response and monitoring mechanism, which will also potentially over time be able, and very importantly, have to deal with unintended implementation difficulties, because there might be some, there's certainly some views that some of the matters will be difficult to implement, but time will tell. And in the absence of having a standard out there and people using it, you can't really tell what the implementation issues are. So thank you and well done on the work done. I'm going to bring this public session to a close. We have a private session after this, and I'm going to ask my board members to convene for the private session at 1:15, 15 minutes. So it's 5 minutes later than our agenda. But thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Gabriella, Ken, James, thank you very much for this. And we'll see each other, hopefully also face-to-face soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda, and to all the PIOB board members, and to Ken and James for supporting me. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin, do we dial into a new link?
I think we can stay on this.